Shalom in Messiah the Branch, and welcome to Part 3 of our study series, The Sabbath Challenge in the Advent Movement. Part 3 is entitled, To Proclaim the Sabbath More Fully. We will be reading from the Symbolic Code, Volume 3, Number 2 of Victor Hodoff. But first I would like to read the statement from Ellen White, the well-known statement where she speaks of to proclaim the Sabbath more fully. It's found in Early Writings, page 34, also Christian Experience and Teachings, where she says, "In the ark was the golden pot of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of stone, which folded together like a book. Jesus opened them, and I saw the 10 Commandments written on them with the finger of God. On one table were 4, and on the other 6. The 4 on the first table shone brighter than the other 6, but the 4th, the Sabbath commandment, shone above them all. For the Sabbath was set apart to be kept in honor of God's holy name. The holy Sabbath looked glorious. A halo of glory was all around it. I saw that the Sabbath commandment was not nailed to the cross. If it was, the other 9 commandments were, and we are at liberty to break them all, as well as to break the 4th. I saw that God had not changed the Sabbath, for he never changes. But the Pope had changed it from the 7th to the first day of the week, for he was to change times and laws. And as I saw that if God changed the Sabbath from the 7th to the first day, he would have changed the writing of the Sabbath commandment written on the tables of stone, which are now in the ark in the most holy place of the temple in heaven. And it would read thus, The first day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. But I saw that it read the same as when written on the tables of stone by the finger of God, and delivered to Moses on Sinai. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. I saw that the holy Sabbath is, and will be, the separating wall between the true Israel of God and unbelievers, and that the Sabbath is the great question to unite the hearts of God's dear, waiting saints. I saw that God had children who do not see and keep the Sabbath. They have not rejected the light upon it, and at the commencement of the time of trouble we were filled with the Holy Ghost, as we went forth and proclaimed the Sabbath more fully. This enraged the churches and nominal Adventists, as they could not refute the Sabbath truth. And at this time God's chosen all saw clearly that we had the truth, and they came out and endured the persecution with us. I saw the sword, famine, pestilence, and great confusion in the land. The wicked thought that we had brought the judgments upon them, and they rose up and took counsel to rid the earth of us, thinking that then the evil would be stayed. Next, I would like to read from Story of Redemption what Ellen White defines as a firm platform. I saw a company who stood well guarded and firm, giving no countenance to those who would unsettle the established faith of the body. God looked upon them with approbation. I was shown 3 steps, the first, second, and third angels' messages. Said my accompanying angel, Woe to him who shall move a block or stir a pin of these messages. The true understanding of these messages is of vital importance. The destiny of souls hangs upon the manner in which they are received. I was again brought down through these messages, and saw how dearly the people of God had purchased their experience. It had been obtained through much suffering and severe conflict. God had led them along step by step until he had placed them upon a solid, immovable platform. I saw individuals approach the platform and examine the foundation. Some with rejoicing immediately stepped upon it. Others commenced to find fault with the foundation. They wished improvements made, and then the platform would be more perfect and the people much happier. Some stepped off the platform to examine it and declared it to be laid wrong. But I saw that nearly all stood firm upon the platform and exhorted those who had stepped off to cease their complaints, for God was the master builder, and they were fighting against him. They recounted the wonderful work of God which had led them to the firm platform, and in union raised their eyes to heaven and with a loud voice glorified God. This affected some of those who had complained and left the platform, and they with humble look again stepped upon it. In the autumn of 1846, we began to observe the Bible Sabbath and to teach and defend it. My attention was first called to the Sabbath while I was on a visit to New Bedford, Massachusetts, earlier in the same year. I there became acquainted with Elder Joseph Bates, who had early embraced the Advent faith and was an active laborer in the cause. Elder B. was keeping the Sabbath and urged its importance. I did not feel its importance and thought that Elder B. erred in dwelling upon the fourth commandment more than upon the other 9, but the Lord gave me a view of the heavenly sanctuary. Such were the momentous truths that opened before those who received the third angel's message as they reviewed their experience from the first proclamation of the second advent to the passing of time in 1844. They saw their disappointment explained, and hope and joy again animated their hearts. Light from the sanctuary illuminated the past, the present, and the future, and they knew that God had led them by his unerring providence. Now, with new courage and firmer faith, they joined in giving the warning of the third angel. Since 1844, in fulfillment of the prophecy of the third angel's message, the attention of the world has been called to the true Sabbath, and a constantly increasing number are returning to the observance of God's holy day. Moving to our main study from February 1937, Mount Carmel Center. We'll move down, and the first study is dealing with revival and reformation, reorganization, beginning at Old Mount Carmel. The second study is our main topic. Which defines what Brother Hodoff taught about proclaiming the Sabbath more fully. Beginning here, Mount Carmel in the process of restoring all things as in the beginning. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. For he spake, and it was. He commanded, and it stood fast. He laid the foundations of the earth, that it should not be removed forever. He who set the starry worlds on high, and tinted with delicate skill the flowers of the field, who filled the earth and the heavens with the wonders of his power, when he came to crown his glorious work, to place one in the midst to stand as ruler of the fair earth, did not fail to create a being worthy of the hand that gave him life. Brother Hodoff here is reading from Patriarchs and Prophets as we continue on here. As man came forth from the hand of his Creator, he was of lofty stature and perfect symmetry. His countenance bore the ruddy tint of health and glowed with the light of life and joy. Adam's height was much greater than that of men who now inhabit the earth. Eve was somewhat less in stature, yet her form was noble and full of beauty. After the creation of Adam, every living creature was brought before him to receive its name. He saw that To each had been given a companion, but among them there was not found an helpmeet for him. Among all the creatures that God had made on the earth, there was not one equal to man. And God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him." Man was not made to dwell in solitude. He was to be a social being. Without companionship, the beautiful scenes and delightful employments of Eden would have failed to yield perfect happiness. Even communion with angels could not have satisfied his desire for sympathy and companionship. There was none of the same nature to love and to be loved. God himself gave Adam a companion. He provided an helpmeet for him, a helper corresponding to him, one who was fitted to be his companion, and who could be one with him in love and sympathy. Eve was created from a rib taken from the side of Adam, signifying that she was not to control him as the head, nor be trampled under his feet as an inferior, but to stand beside him as an equal, to be loved and protected by him. A part of man, bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh, she was his second self, showing the close union and the affectionate attachment that should exist in this relation. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it. Therefore shall man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one. God celebrated the first marriage. Thus, the institution has for its originator the Creator of the universe. Marriage is honorable. It was one of the first gifts of God to man, and it is one of the two institutions that, after the fall, Adam brought with him beyond the gates of paradise. When the divine principles are recognized and obeyed in this relation, marriage is a blessing. It guards the purity and happiness of the race. It provides for man's social needs. It elevates the physical, the intellectual, and the moral nature. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Everything that God had made was the perfection of beauty, and nothing seemed wanting that could contribute to the happiness of the holy pair. Yet the Creator gave them still another token of his love by preparing a garden especially for their home. In this garden were trees of every variety, many of them laden with fragrant and delicious fruit. There were lovely vines, growing upright, yet presenting a most graceful appearance, with their branches drooping under the load of their tempting fruit, of the richest and most varied hues. It was the work of Adam and Eve to train the branches of the vine to form bowers, thus making for themselves a dwelling from living trees covered with foliage and fruit. There were fragrant flowers of every hue in rich profusion. In the midst of the garden stood the tree of life, surpassing in glory all other trees. Its fruit appeared like apples of gold and silver, and had the power to perpetuate life. The creation was now complete. The heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Eden bloomed on earth. Adam and Eve had free access to the tree of life. No taint of sin or shadow of death marred the fair creation. The morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. The great Jehovah had laid the foundations of the earth. He had dressed the whole world in the garb of beauty, and had filled it with things useful to man. He had created all the wonders of the land and of the sea. In 6 days, the great work of creation had been accomplished. And God rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. God looked with satisfaction upon the work of his hands. All was perfect, worthy of its divine author, and he rested not as one weary, but as well pleased with the fruits of his wisdom and goodness and the manifestation of his glory. After resting upon the seventh day, God sanctified it, or set it apart, as a day of rest for man. Following the example of the Creator, man was to rest upon this sacred day, that as he should look upon the heavens and the earth, he might reflect upon God's great work of creation, and that as he should behold the evidences of God's wisdom and goodness, his heart might be filled with love and reverence for his Maker. Patriarchs and Prophets, pages 44 through 47. The foregoing paragraphs make it plain that only sacred institutions brought forth from beautiful Eden are the institution of marriage and the institution of the Sabbath, home and rest. And the formers being instituted, the first of the two, and solely for the use and benefit of man, clearly shows that the Sabbath, as Christ declared to the Pharisees, was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Our Eden parents, in celebrating the first Sabbath, not only commemorated God's completing the whole creation, but also their own marriage. When Adam and Eve fell into sin, losing their beautiful garments of light, they lost dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Besides possession of their Eden home and access to the tree of life. Thus, when he sinned, Adam lost his dominion, surrendering all to Satan, whereupon unto the woman God said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I have commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it was thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. Now arises the question, when and how will the first dominion be restored? To which the Scriptures answer, Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. And Jesus says, Elias verily comes first and restores all things. Therefore Elijah's coming must precede both the great and dreadful day of the Lord and his second coming. And when he comes, he must restore all things. Jesus' statement, found in Mark 9:12, proves that before he appears the second time, someone, antitypical Elijah, cometh first and restoreth all things. Hence, the dominion and all that was lost must be restored in the time of Elijah's message. Yea, even the curses of the earth must then be removed. In that day, saith the Lord, will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground, and I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth, and I will make them to lie down safely. And I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in judgment and in loving kindness and in mercies. Hosea 2:18-19. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Isaiah 11. He will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from off all faces, and the rebuke of his people shall he take away from off all the earth. For the Lord has spoken it. And it shall be said in that day, Lo, this is our God, we have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord, we have waited for him. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. Isaiah 25. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Isaiah 66. And he showed me a pure river of water, of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. Revelation 22. The foregoing passages show that the message by any typical Elijah shall bring again the dominion which Adam lost. And as far as the prophecies above mentioned are concerned, the only institution that apparently seems to remain in darkness as to its original countenance or continuance and restoration to its original sacredness is the institution of marriage. But how could the Lord possibly allow himself, during the very time in which all things must be restored, to annul the first of all the institutions which he himself instituted, the crowning act in the week of creation, and in favor of which he said, "It is not good that man should be alone"? Moreover, How could the Word say that Elijah must restore all things if he were not also going to restore the marriage institution? Furthermore, if God saw that it was not good for man to be alone originally in the Garden of Eden, then why should it be good for him when he returns to Eden? Or shall we all now, in this time of gathering and of receiving the inheritance of the first dominion, divorce our wives? If the redeeming of saints must spell divorce for them, why, then, should God compose the kingdom of both sexes? Would Adam, who chose to die rather than to part from Eve, enjoy life if, upon returning to his Eden home, his wife should be missing? Or if he should then have to divorce her? Furthermore, the scriptures say of Elijah that he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children and the heart of the children to their fathers. Malachi 4:6. Hence, both the foregoing scripture and Joel 2:16, which says, "Gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, and those that suck the breasts," prove that Elijah's message is to unite families, not separate them. The Spirit of God revealed to Paul that in the latter days evil spirits would attempt to overthrow God's plan for his people. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, forbidding to marry. Whereas we need no doctrine that would forbid marrying. We do need to know why we marry and how to live. Hence, we need a thorough reformation, a change in ideas and theories and habits and practices. Christ Our Righteousness, page 154. And as we can see, this is certainly part of the promised revival, reformation, and reorganization, as Brother Hodoff covered in the study just before this one, where he quotes this statement also. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Matthew 19. Just as Satan had perverted the Sabbath day, so he has perverted the marriage relation, and therefore marriage is looked upon even by most Christians as something questionable, and in a way even evil and sinful, although, with but few exceptions, they all marry. Hence, though the word says, Who findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord, Proverbs 18:22, most marriages prove to be a curse. Therefore, the fewer the marriages contracted, the better for all, both men and women. A statement by Ellen White, Volume 5. In fact, the only marriages that God can honor are those which are entered upon only after both parties inquire of Him and receive His sanction. Marriage affects the afterlife, both in this world and in the world to come. A sincere Christian will make no plans that God cannot approve. Ministry of Healing 1359. The family tie is the closest, the most tender and sacred of any on earth. It was designed to be a blessing to mankind, and it is a blessing wherever the marriage covenant is entered into intelligently, in the fear of God, and with due consideration for its responsibilities. Thus, marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. Hebrews 13:4. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. 1 Timothy 3. However, as with the institution of the Sabbath, so must God restore that of marriage. The words of Christ, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. Matthew 22:30 reveal that we have lost sight of the true marriage institution, and as God has not yet fully made known to us the state of our future life, we are just now unable fully to comprehend either the marriage or the family relationship after the resurrection. Upon the occasion of the Pharisees questioning Christ after their characteristic fashion, as touching the sacred institution of marriage, Jesus pointed his hearers back to the institution as ordained at creation. He referred them to the blessed days of Eden, when God pronounced all things very good. Then marriage and the Sabbath had their origin, twin institutions for the glory of God and the benefit of humanity. Then, as the Creator joined the hands of the holy pair in wedlock, saying, "A man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one." Genesis 2:24. He enunciated the law of marriage for all the children of Adam to the close of time. That which the Eternal Father himself had pronounced good was the law of highest blessing and development for man. Mount of Blessings 99:100. Furthermore, the fact that a doctrine which forbids marriages is a doctrine of devils, 1 Timothy 4, shows not only that marriage is an everlasting institution, but also that in the time of the restitution of all things, it is of great import. For were it not so, the devils would not waste a moment in attacking it. But from the opening of the great controversy, it has been Satan's studied effort to pervert the marriage institution, to weaken its obligations and lessen its sacredness, for in no surer way could he deface the image of God in man and open the door to misery and vice. Patriarchs and Prophets. Marriage was in God's order. It was one of his first institutions which he established. He gave special directions concerning this ordinance, clothing it with sanctity and beauty. But these directions were forgotten, and marriage was perverted and made to minister to passion. A similar condition of things exists now. Like every other one of God's good gifts entrusted to the keeping of humanity, marriage has been perverted by sin, but it is the purpose of the gospel to restore its purity and beauty. Mount of Blessings. Inspiration further says, "And he answered and told them, Elias verily comes first, and restores all things." In the time of the end, every divine institution is to be restored. Prophets of Kings 6, 7, 8. The foregoing passages make clear at least three main facts, namely, that this first institution which God ordained and established on earth was that of the marriage, and that the second was that of the Sabbath. So we see here Brother Hoddef tying the two institutions together very plainly, as Sister White did also. Number two, that God intended that both of these institutions should endure intact, but that Satan has perverted and corrupted them. Until today, they retain but little of their pristine purity. 3. That consequently, in the time of the end, God will send Elijah the prophet to restore not only both of these, but also all other desecrated divine institutions. Hence, as all things must be restored, and as Elijah must effect their restoration, it follows that as the joint institutions of marriage and the Sabbath were the first to be instituted, and the first to be profaned and debased, they must therefore be the first to be restored. And it's apparent that we cannot restore them until a challenge was made upon both of these institutions, which has been fulfilled. Moreover, as there is no truth where there is no type, the working out of divine design in ordaining and establishing on Friday, or the sixth day of creation, the marriage institution, and on the seventh day, the Sabbath, thus gave type both to the reestablishing of these institutions and to the restoring of them to the sanctity and beauty of their first estate. And as we must observe the Sabbath on the seventh day, likewise we ought to solemnize marriage on Friday, the sixth day of the week. Furthermore, as God foresaw that in the closing hours of probation, the order of events would be singularly anomalous and preternatural, he mercifully thus forewarned us in the following familiar statements from Testimonies to Ministers. Let me tell you that the Lord will work in this last work in a manner very much out of the common order of things, and in a way that will be contrary to any human planning. TM 300. Therefore, with the one who is to come in the spirit and power of Elijah, men will find fault and say, "You are too earnest. You do not interpret the Scriptures in the proper way. Let me tell you how to teach your message." TM 475, 476. Nevertheless, as representatives of the Elijah message, we are called to lead out by precept and example in the restoration of all things, especially the marriage and Sabbath institutions. For the one represents the home and the other the memorial of its creation. Therefore, before we go forth to proclaim the Sabbath more fully, we must lift up marriage, the first institution, from the sordid depths to which Satan has plunged it. As we see here, Brother Hoddef uses this phrase of Sister White from Early Writings, page 34. Therefore, before we go forth to proclaim the Sabbath more fully, we must lift up marriage, the first institution, from the sordid depths to which Satan has plunged it. From this point on, we will not read. It goes on to describe Brother Hoddif's marriage to Florence Hoddif at Old Mount Carmel in 1937. In conclusion, of proclaiming the Sabbath more fully, in the concluding paragraphs of this symbolic code, we are presented with the joyous event of Brother Hoddif's own marriage to Florence Hermanson in 1937 being announced to the Davidian field outside of Mount Carmel. Brother Hoddif's introduction to his own wedding gives us a clear and extensive explanation as to what is to be restored in the time of the restitution of all things, namely, beginning with the institution of marriage and the Sabbath. Until now, proclaiming the Sabbath more fully could not be fulfilled until this Sabbath challenge in the Advent movement became manifest. Until now, the first sealing truth of Revelation 3:12, the Sabbath seal, could not be applied in its fullest application in the judgment for the living until the twin institutions of creation, marriage and the Sabbath, came under attack in the branch movement. The primary burden of this work of restoration of these two divine institutions falls upon the branch movement because no other movement since 1844 has suffered such a clear and direct attack on these two institutions, having been evidenced in the apostasy of Vernon Howell or David Koresh, and presently in the last 2 years, the Sabbath apostasy at New Mount Carmel. David Koresh did in fact destroy the institution of marriage in his representative movement in the branch from 1984 to 1993, at least in the last few years of his work, of his presence there at New Mount Carmel. He annulled all marriages. But now in our day, the dissolution of the historical Sabbath, truly part of the third angel's message itself at New Mount Carmel, has fulfilled the definition of the mark of the beast in the church, the purposeful change of the historical Seventh-day Sabbath of creation as taught by Ellen White and her successors. Today, for over 2 years, the first day of the week has been instituted at New Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, in total variance with all of the teachings of the founders of the Advent movement and the founders of the consecutive messages of Revelation 14. The Sabbath and sanctuary truths stand together as do the twin institutions of marriage and the Sabbath, clearly indicated by Brother Hoddif's study. The Shepherd's Rod messenger, Victor Hoddif, clearly evidences in his teaching that this is, in verity, the beginning of proclaiming the Sabbath more fully, when we recognize this fulfillment and thereby appropriate the Sabbath seal, Revelation 3:12, in a fuller sense. It is evident to many of us that now this proclaiming the Sabbath more fully was to be fulfilled primarily in the third section of the Advent movement, the branch, from 1955 until today, not in the SDA Church, not apparently as foreseeable at this time. Because of this double apostasy in the branch, we may now apply the fulfillment of proclaiming the Sabbath more fully in a little company standing in the light, who have recognized this apostasy and may now present the Sabbath and marriage institutions in a fuller light together, as Victor Hoddif introduced in 3 Symbolic Code number 2. This has been a severe conflict for the little company who have stood against this predicted final general apostasy in the church. And remember, this was to be fulfilled in the church first, then in the world, per the statements of Victor Houteff and Ben Roden, as revealed in parts 1 and 2 of this series, the Sabbath Challenge in the Advent Movement. Why have these destructive events, spiritual and actual, come about in the branch? First, in the apostasy of the Koresh movement, the 51-day Waco siege of 1993, and now in the challenge of the very Sabbath truth of the third angel message itself at New Mount Carmel, Waco. Repeating the words of Victor Houteff and Benjamin Roden, quoted from branch lesson number 3, in the previous 2 studies on the Sabbath challenge, we are to witness the seeming fall and rise again of the branch movement. As Victor Houteff stated, that the truth will be raised to glorious exaltation and victory to the shame of its enemies. As we are shown in Matthew 13:27, an enemy hath done this, to bring in confusion and dishonor to the new name of Messiah the branch, which consequently brings about a purification through repentance of those who brought the apostasy, or a purification through expulsion, Revelation 3:16, as is further portrayed in the judgment prophecy of Isaiah 4:2, just before the branch movement becomes beautiful and glorious for them that are escaped, those who escape the divine judgment of Revelation 3:16, when Christ spews the lukewarm Laodiceans out of his mouth, out of his body. Those of us who have stood on the platform of eternal truth in the Advent movement have now passed through the shaking, testing time in this third section of the movement. Where the greatest light has been given, the greatest apostasy has been manifest. Where the greatest light has been revealed, the branch, or in the branch movement, there the enemy of truth has been working to confuse, to dishonor, and if possible, destroy the messages of heaven since 1844. From the pen of inspiration, the church may appear as about to fall. The shaking of God blows away multitudes like dry leaves. Chaff like a cloud will be borne away on the wind, even from places where we see only floors of rich wheat. Soon God's people will be tested by fiery trials, and the great proportion of those who now appear to be genuine and true will prove to be base metal. When the religion of Christ is most held in contempt, when his law is most despised, then should our zeal be the warmest and our courage and firmness the most unflinching, to stand in defense of truth and righteousness when the majority forsake us, to fight the battles of the Lord when champions are few. This will be our test. At this time we must gather warmth from the coldness of others, courage from their cowardice, and loyalty from their treason. The church may appear as about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains while the sinners in Zion will be sifted out, the chaff separated from the precious wheat. This is a terrible ordeal, but nevertheless it must take place. And how much more this will apply to the wave sheaf company, the barley section of the harvest. As the storm approaches, a large class who have professed faith in the third angel's message, but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth, abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition. God's faithful will be revealed. The Lord has faithful servants who in the shaking, testing time will be disclosed to view. There are precious ones now hidden who have not bowed the knee to Baal. They have not had the light which has been shining in a concentrated blaze upon you, but it may be under a rough and uninviting exterior. The pure brightness of a genuine Christian character will be revealed. In the daytime we look toward heaven, but do not see the stars. They are there, but fixed in the firmament. But the eye cannot distinguish them. In the night we behold their genuine luster. On every occasion that persecution takes place, the witnesses make decisions, either for Christ or against him. Those who show sympathy for men wrongly condemned, who are not bitter against them, show their attachment for Christ. This concludes Part 3 of this study series. We will continue in Part 4 with a more science-oriented explanation of the weekly cycle in relation to the calendar and the lights in the heavens, the sun and the moon, and their movements. Shalom.